You're scrolling through old messages at 2 a.m., rereading conversations that used to flow so easily, now replaced by one-word answers and days of silence. You've asked what's wrong a dozen times, gotten "I'm fine" or "I just need space" in return, and now you're left wondering if you imagined the entire connection. But here's what nobody tells you about loving someone with an avoidant attachment style. While you're on the outside feeling abandoned and confused, there's a full-scale emotional war happening inside them that they can't express, can't explain, and sometimes can't even recognize themselves. Today, we're diving deep into the hidden emotional world of the avoidant, not to excuse the pain they cause, not to convince you to stay, but to finally give you the truth behind the walls, so you can stop blaming yourself for someone else's defense mechanisms. The first thing you need to understand is the paradox at the heart of their shutdown. They're not running from you, they're running from the terrifying intensity of their own emotions. When you see them pull away, what you're actually witnessing is someone who feels too much, not too little. The moment you express deeper feelings, ask for more commitment, or even just show up with consistent love, their nervous system registers this as a threat. Not because your love is dangerous, but because in their formative years, they learned that emotional needs led to disappointment, that vulnerability led to pain, and that the safest way to survive was to need nothing from anyone. So when the relationship starts to deepen, when real intimacy begins to develop, every cell in their body screams danger. They're not consciously thinking, "I need to hurt this person," or "I want to create distance." Their autopilot survival system is taking over, the same system that kept them safe when they were 5 years old, and learned that crying brought irritation instead of comfort, that asking for reassurance brought criticism instead of warmth. The fear they feel in moments of closeness isn't rational, it's primal. It's the terror of losing themselves, of being consumed, of being so needed by another person that their carefully constructed independence crumbles. And because this fear lives in the body, not the logical mind, they can't just think their way out of it. Beneath the cold exterior and seemingly indifferent behavior lies something most people never see. Profound, crushing shame. When they shut you out, they're not oblivious to what they're doing. They see the hurt in your eyes. They notice when you stop reaching out as much. They're aware that they're being distant, unavailable, emotionally absent, and deep in their core, beneath all the defense mechanisms and rationalizations, they feel terrible about it. But here's the cruel twist. That shame actually reinforces the shutdown rather than breaking it. Because now they're not just dealing with the original overwhelm of intimacy, they're also dealing with feeling like a fundamentally broken person who can't love properly, who keeps hurting people they care about, who's destined to fail at relationships. This creates a vicious spiral where the shame makes them withdraw further because they start believing you deserve better, that you'd be happier with someone who can give you what they can't, that they're doing you a favor by creating distance. The shame tells them they're not enough, and rather than leaning in and risking proving that belief true, they pull back and confirm it through their own behavior. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy they can't escape, and every time they shut down, the shame grows heavier, making the next shutdown even more likely. What looks like a cold, calculated decision to ice you out is actually their nervous system's autopilot self-protection mechanism, and understanding this changes everything. From childhood, they learned that emotional self-sufficiency was survival. Maybe their parents were emotionally unavailable. Maybe their needs were dismissed as dramatic or needy. Maybe they were punished for expressing vulnerability, or maybe they simply learned that the adults in their life couldn't handle emotional complexity, so they stopped bringing it to them. Whatever the origin story, the lesson was clear. I am safest when I need nothing from anyone. This became hardwired into their neural pathways, an automatic response that doesn't require conscious thought. So when you get close, when the relationship deepens, when you start to matter more than they're comfortable with, this ancient programming kicks in without their permission. It's not personal. It's not about your worth or your value or anything you did wrong. It's about a wounded child inside them, who learned that closeness equals danger, that depending on someone means inevitable disappointment, that the only person they can truly rely on is themselves. The shutdown is their nervous system trying to protect them from a threat that no longer exists, but still feels absolutely real in their body. They're not choosing to hurt you any more than someone with a phobia chooses to panic at the sight of their trigger. Inside their mind during the shutdown is an agonizing internal war that tears them apart, even if you never see evidence of the battle. On one side is their deep human need for connection, intimacy, and love, because avoidants are still human, still hardwired for attachment, still longing to be seen and accepted. On the other side is their equally powerful need for autonomy, space, and self-protection. These two needs are in constant conflict, creating a push-pull dynamic that's as confusing for them as it is for you. They'll have moments where they let you in, where they're warm and present and everything feels right. And in those moments, they genuinely mean it. But then the closeness triggers the fear, and suddenly they need to pull back, create distance, reassert their independence. What makes this particularly torturous is that they often can't predict which side will win at any given moment. They might wake up feeling connected and engaged, then by afternoon feel suffocated and desperate for space, with no clear understanding of what changed. This inconsistency isn't manipulation or game playing. It's the manifestation of unresolved attachment trauma playing out in real time. They want you, and they want you gone. They love you, and they're terrified of that love. They crave the intimacy you offer, and they're overwhelmed by the vulnerability it requires. Living with this internal contradiction is exhausting, and the shutdown becomes the only way they know to temporarily resolve the unbearable tension. Here's something that might surprise you. When you ask an avoidant why they're being distant or what's wrong, their "I don't know" or "nothing" might actually be the truth. Most avoidants have spent a lifetime disconnecting from their emotional experience because emotions were unsafe, unwelcome, or simply too much to handle without support. This means they've developed extremely limited emotional vocabulary and virtually no practice in identifying, articulating, or processing their internal states. When feelings arise, especially uncomfortable ones like fear, sadness, or longing, they experience them as vague physical sensations or general unease rather than nameable emotions with clear causes. So when you press them to explain what they're feeling or why they've withdrawn, they genuinely might not have access to that information. It's not that they're hiding it from you, it's that they've hidden it so deeply from themselves that they can't retrieve it even when they want to. The emotional awareness simply isn't there. Where you might feel sadness and think, "I'm sad because I miss connection," they might just feel a tightness in their chest and an urge to be alone, with no conscious understanding of the emotion or its source. This emotional illiteracy is a protective adaptation that served them well in childhood, but now leaves them unable to participate in the kind of vulnerable communication that healthy relationships require. The silence and vagueness aren't always manipulation or stonewalling. Sometimes they're the only response available to someone who was never taught the language of emotions. Perhaps the most painful truth is that avoidants are often acutely aware of their patterns and just as frustrated with themselves as you are with them. They can see themselves pulling away. They notice themselves giving short answers when you're trying to connect. They're conscious of choosing solitude over intimacy, walls over vulnerability, safety over love, and they hate it. They hate watching themselves repeat the same destructive patterns, hate seeing the hurt in your eyes, hate knowing they're sabotaging something good because they can't get out of their own way. There's often a part of them that desperately wants to be different, wants to be the partner who shows up emotionally, who communicates openly, who doesn't run when things get real. But wanting to change and being able to change are two completely different things, especially when the patterns are rooted in survival mechanisms formed decades ago. So they're trapped in this horrible cycle of self-awareness, without transformation, knowing what they're doing wrong, but feeling powerless to stop it. This creates an additional layer of suffering that nobody sees. The private anguish of watching yourself hurt someone you care about, and being unable to override the programming. The shutdown isn't happening because they're indifferent to your pain. Often it's happening despite their awareness of it, which only compounds their shame and sense of brokenness, which then reinforces the very withdrawal they're trying to avoid. So when an avoidant shuts you out, what are they actually feeling beneath the cold exterior and radio silence? They're feeling overwhelmed by the intensity and emotional demands of the relationship. Even if those demands are completely reasonable and healthy, they're feeling terrified that they're fundamentally incapable of being the partner you need. That eventually you'll see through whatever facades are maintained and discover they're not enough. They're feeling suffocated by the vulnerability that real intimacy requires, like they're being asked to breathe underwater. They're feeling guilty and ashamed for not being able to show up emotionally, for hurting you, for being so broken that they can't do what seems to come naturally to everyone else. They're feeling trapped between the competing needs to stay connected and to protect themselves, with no clear path forward that satisfies both. But underneath all the fear and shame and confusion, there's often something else that might surprise you. Genuine love. Not the kind of love that shows up consistently, or communicates clearly, or makes you feel secure, but love nonetheless. Complicated, terrifying, defended love that they don't know how to express without risking the annihilation of their carefully protected self. The distance they create isn't evidence of indifference. Sometimes it's evidence that they care so much, it threatens their entire identity as a self-sufficient person who needs nothing from anyone. The shutdown is their way of managing feelings that are too big, too intense, too threatening to face head-on. Understanding this doesn't mean you have to accept breadcrumbs or wait indefinitely for someone to heal, but it does mean you can finally stop taking it personally and recognize their withdrawal for what it really is. Not a rejection of your worth, but a desperate attempt to survive their own internal chaos.